she has put together a wonderful presentation today about the 100th anniversary of when the
There we go. Okay, so welcome everybody. We are here today at the Plymouth Public Library. We are ready for the presentation when the president came to Plymouth. It's the 100th anniversary of that, and Liz Dube, who is our technical services librarian here at the library, will be presenting this for us. All right, Liz, take it away.
Thank you, Julie, and I thank everyone for your patience. Almost every technical glitch that could happen to us has just happened. So hopefully we will now be able to enjoy our presentation. So right now we are going to be commemorating a commemoration. Almost exactly 100 years ago to the day, arguably the most lavish anniversary celebration of the Pilgrims landing, which will ever take place, happened here in town. So I'm planning to run through the events of the day and then, time permitting, talk a little bit about the digitization of the photographs we will be looking at, which allow us to relive this event quite vividly. So to get started, the 300th anniversary of the landing of the Pilgrims celebration here in Plymouth was truly remarkable. It was the period, the era of time when the construction and dedication of major monuments, which have become landmarks, all took place. So the classical portico over Plymouth Rock, the granite facade of Pilgrim Hall Museum, the statue of Massasoit, which overlooks the harbor. All of these date from 1920, 21, 22. The most elaborate event, and that is actually an understatement, to take place at the time was the visit of President Warren G. Harding on August 1st, 1921. He arrived with fanfare in the morning, presided over a reception at Town Wharf, and then motorcaded to Holmes Field, the staging area of an immense parade, which he rode at the head of. He observed the rest of the parade in a reviewing stand at the bottom of Coles Hill. Following a luncheon, there was a band concert, and the president was then the featured speaker at what was designated as Pageant Field, which is basically the area at the bottom. At the beginning of the evening, there was a formal dinner, and then the president and a crowd estimated at 10,000 gathered to watch a special performance of Harvard professor George P. Baker's play / pageant called The Pilgrim Spirit. So how do we know so much about this day? It was exhaustively covered in the regional and national press at the time. Several contemporary books were written about it. And over the years, the library has also researched this topic. The library publication Beyond Plymouth Rock has an excellent short article on the tercentenary. And we also have a website, part of our website dedicated to our collection of historic photos, which provides a lot more detail and context than I will be able to go into today. So the library owns a collection of 159 photos of the tercentenary celebration. They were donated to us in 1977. This is a picture of the original photo album on the left in which they were bound. And I have also included a photo of the title page, which you can see. I think you can get the idea that it was pretty smudged and sort of really not in the greatest condition. So the photos sat in this condition, in this deteriorating album, atop a bookcase in the local history office for decades. But fortunately, starting in 2014, working with an organization called the Digital Commonwealth at the Boston Public Library, we were able to have high quality digital copies of all of our photographs taken, and subsequently to make these available for viewing on our website, as well as in the collection of the Digital Commonwealth. So as I said, depending on how the time goes, I can go into this a little bit after we talk about the day itself. So to return to the story of the day, like the Pilgrims, President Harding arrived via sea. He had spent the previous night on the presidential yacht, and that the largest ship you see in this photo is the presidential yacht, which ironically or not, was actually named the Mayflower. On July 31st, 1921, that yacht was anchored in Buzzards Bay, and it was accompanied by 3 US naval battleships. And you can see these in this photo on the horizon. They were the Delaware, the North Dakota, and the Pennsylvania. Plus, they were also accompanied by a British cruiser called the Cambrian. Those vessels had actually spent the night anchored off Saquesh, and on the morning of August 1st, they voyaged south to the mouth of Cape Cod Canal, where they met the yacht, which in turn was accompanied by 6 Navy destroyers. So this flotilla steamed north to the Gurnet, where the Navy vessels remained while the yacht continued up the shipping channel to Anchorage in Plymouth Harbor. And I don't have the exact dimensions, but as you can see from this photo, please note that this presidential yacht was a very sizable vessel. From there, Harding and his entourage, which included Mrs. Harding, Vice President and Mrs. Calvin Coolidge, the governor of Massachusetts, Channing Cox, and his wife, Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, the governor of Rhode Island, and other assorted dignitaries, were all brought ashore by a sub-chaser, a smaller military vessel, and they stepped off of that onto the dock at State Wharf. So here are photos of the day with the disembarkation. The photo on the left was the occasion was probably the 21 gun salute. The local Army National Guard was present to salute. And Mrs. Harding, it was noted in the newspaper accounts of the time, she's standing behind the president and she is wearing a white fox collar. So you can see her. None of the photos, unfortunately today, of her are very good, but anyway, there she is. Reports of the day invariably talk about what wonderful weather it was. So I don't know whether she just didn't want to take her fur off or whether she was actually cold. Anyway, there were ceremonies at the dock. On the right, you can see President Harding. He presented medals to 30 New Bedford pupils who were the children of foreign-born parents. And they were awarded prizes for their proficiency in English. They all entered the contest, which was sponsored by the local newspaper, the New Bedford Standard. So after that, escorted by a troop of mounted cavalry, and the cavalry, by the way, had arrived. There were hundreds of them. They camped out on the field at Nelson Street. They had arrived several days prior to that, and apparently had been an enjoyable tourist attraction. So anyway, that morning they got to escort the president. He and his entourage got into automobiles, and they drove up North Street, escorted by the cavalry and also a marching band. So they traveled up North Street to Court Street and from there to Holmes Field. where the parade was forming. So anyone who's been to a parade in Plymouth will be very familiar with the route that, that the parade traveled that day. The orange dot on this map represents the route that they took. They marched south down Court Street. There is a sort of turquoise colored dotted line here. That marks the spot where the president, who was at the very front of the parade, he and a few of the other dignitaries left the parade at that point and drove down Leiden Street, where they then were seated on the reviewing stand. And this is a photo of the reviewing stand on the waterfront. The rest of the parade continued marching. They went up Pleasant Street and went around the training green, turned down South Street, went north again on Sandwich Street, and then proceeded down Water Street, where they marched past the reviewing stand. So the parade at the time was thought to be one of the greatest parades that was ever assembled. Of the several books that were contemporaneously published, Frederick W. Bittinger wrote, quote, "The Grand Parade was perhaps the finest in every way ever seen in this part of the world." So the parade itself was massive. And then there was, they didn't even try to count the numbers. They just called it a tremendous crowd, which had also brought thousands of automobiles. So the parade was comprised of 5 divisions. The first 2 divisions were dignitaries who rode, by and large, they rode in automobiles. Following the dignitaries, there were many units of military, Army, Navy, Marines, and I believe, I forget now the number, there were dozens of marching bands. There were 2 divisions of floats. There was a division of community floats, 32 communities in all from Eastern Massachusetts, really, entered floats. They all had historical themes. And the last and final division of floats were commercial floats. And the theme was to celebrate industrial Plymouth. So the collection of photos that the library has were taken by a photographer named Edward McLaughlin. He was a local photographer. He was a subcontractor hired by the official photographer for the event, whose name was Russell. I don't know if it's a majority, but a very large percentage of the photos that the library owns are photos of the parade. And most of those were taken from a fixed position, probably a 2nd-story window, at the top of North Street, in a building on a corner there, looking north as the parade came down Court Street. McLaughlin's photos, together with Russell's, were almost all published in a 1923 volume, which was titled The Plymouth Tercentenary by H. Bloomingdale. Fortunately for us, these photos are extensively captioned, which has enabled us to identify the subjects of most of these pictures with certainty. So these are pictures of 2 floats, and they give you a really good idea. You can see, even though one has a tighter focus, that they are basically taken from the same position. On the left, there's a shot of the first prize winner in the Historics Floats category. It was entered by the town of Marshfield, and its title was descendants of Governor Winslow. And on the right, the entry is the first prize in the commercial floats division, which was from the Plymouth Cordage Company. So having, as I've said, having mentioned that the majority of these shots were taken from this fixed vantage point, there are also a few that show the floats in other places in town. So this slide shows the exact same two floats we were just looking at. Presumably these photos were taken earlier in the day when floats were lined up for judging. And they give more glimpses around town of what 1921 Plymouth is like. The Cordage float on the right is in front of the Forefathers Monument, which you can see is actually quite barren looking there. There's very, very minimal landscaping. The streets are not paved. The historic Marshfield float is a nice shot because the view we just saw from the parade itself was from the other side. So this shows you the back. The floats, some of the descriptions show that a great deal of detail and thought went into a lot of these entries. So after the parade, the president and the dignitaries enjoyed what was described as an informal luncheon. After that, there was a band concert. And then in the afternoon, the president returned to the reviewing stand by the harbor. And he was, this particular venue was called Pageant Field at the time. They estimate the crowd that afternoon to hear the president speak at about 10,000. This photo was taken from the top of Coles Hill, looking down, and the large ship that you see at the top left of the picture, that is a view of the presidential yacht. The other large ship sailing vessel that you can see in the background, this is a replica of the Mayflower that was used in the pageant. So that's, I guess, the president's Mayflower and the pageant's Mayflower. So there were numerous others besides the president who made remarks that afternoon. The Governor Cox spoke. Harding and Cox both paid particular tribute to the Pilgrims in their remarks. And dignitaries from the Netherlands and Britain spoke as well. So to prepare for the tercentenary celebrations, the waterfront had been, existing structures on the waterfront had been demolished. They were pretty merciless in tearing buildings down just to prepare for this day, for this celebration. This is a view of the waterfront looking north. The structure, the canopied structure here was called Billings Canopy. That was built in the 19th century. It was designed by Hammett Billings, the sculptor and architect responsible for the Forefathers Monument. So Plymouth Rock, until 1921, was housed there, or in 1920, I think they had removed it at that point because by the time of the celebration that we're looking at, this structure no longer existed. And this is another view. This is actually from the library's collection of photos. And this was taken just prior to the demolition of of the Billings canopy. And here is a shot of the president, who, as I said, he delivered a fairly lengthy speech. So people came for a parade and speeches, and it was quite the day. So following the speeches, the dignitaries, the presidential party, had another dinner. And then really the even grander than the parade, the keystone event of the day was the presentation, the performance of the Pilgrim Spirit, the Plymouth Tercentenary pageant. Citizens of Plymouth, Kingston, Duxbury, Marshfield performed in what was a gigantic undertaking. The cast was made up of 1,300 people. And there are local accounts in the Old Colony Memorial. Women, generally, I think all the seamstresses spent months sewing all of the costumes, which were designed and overseen by Professor Baker. They were actually, they have been displayed at Pilgrim Hall, and those that have survived show that they were really just beautiful and quite elaborate. But that wasn't all. In addition to the performers, there was a chorus of 300 voices and a full orchestra. So the play was performed live at 8:30 in the evening on 11 occasions during July and August in 1921. And the script is readily available online. It's been digitized. We have links on our website if you want to read it. I'm just going to read a bit of it to you to give you a feeling for how theatrical it was. The pageant began with a fanfare of trumpets. And then, and I'm quoting from the script, "From the canopied rock, a rich, powerful voice speaks. The speaker is unseen. The voice announces, 'I, the Rock of Plymouth, speak to you Americans. Here I rested in the ooze from the ages primordial. Men came and went, Norsemen, seamen of England, voyagers of France, Dutch adventurers. Over and round me, the Indians worked, played, lived. I was a rock of millions along the shore, waiting for what?'" So as I said, the text is readily available online if you're interested in reading it. So the bulk of the narrative, of course, centered around the story of the Pilgrims' journey from England to Holland to Plymouth and the establishment of their new home here. As I pointed out, the Pilgrims dramatically arrived on pageant field via the Mayflower. So in this scene we're looking at right here is a reenactment of the Pilgrims and the Indians agreeing to the Treaty of April 1621. But it was not merely a narrative. There were many, many parts of this production that consisted of grand processions. And this is a photo from the finale. There were riders, there were many mounted participants, and the very grand finale in the back were women marching, carrying flags from every state in the nation at the time. The pageant made elaborate use of electric lighting. That was one of the reasons for the demolition, so that they could amass sufficient electric lights. I'm not sure the exact number. I read somewhere that there were 3,000 incandescent light bulbs installed, and there was a lot of self-congratulation on how enormous the undertaking for the electrical lighting was. People who attended the August 1st, 1921 pageant were completely impressed beyond that, though, because on that night, the battleships, which were all anchored off of Burnett Point, added searchlight drill. Spectators described it as, quote, an illuminated dance of the beams, which laced in with each other, whirled aloft, or sprayed out like a stream of a tremendous fountain. So after this busy day, Harding departed as he had come on the presidential yacht. Obviously, this is a picture from earlier in the day, but just to give you a sense of what it must have been like that whole day with this, this yacht harbored in Plymouth. So the sub chaser came and ferried all of the presidential entourage back to the yacht. And Harding's next stop after Plymouth was Portland. He was on to Maine. He was interviewed by reporters right after this, and he was quoted at length. I'm going to read a bit just so you can see how he felt about the day. And he said, "What impressed me most of all about the pageant, apart from the sheer beauty of the spectacle and the artistry with which it was celebrated, was the fine manner in which the spirit of this tercentenary celebration was brought out. For me, the pageant, as indeed this whole day, has been an unforgettable experience. The pageant we have just seen shows in vivid, spectacular form how much we of today owe to that sturdy Pilgrim spirit which the first founders of our nation brought with them from across the seas. I believe most firmly that the stern, indomitable spirit with which the Pilgrims faced the perils of an unknown land for the sake of conscience represents that which is truest and best in America today." So, so you can see, I think that it's safe to say that August 1st, 1921 was a truly extraordinary day in every way. So now that we've run through the events of the day, I thought I could give you a quick glimpse into the work that went in to taking our collection of photos from their deteriorating photo album to their current display on our website. So let me go to. So if you've never visited the website of the Digital Commonwealth, it's really quite a resource to browse. Working with the Boston Public Library, the Digital Commonwealth is working to assist mainly libraries and archives in digitizing their historic collections. They are funded by grants and also by membership fees. The Plymouth Library joined. You pay an annual amount to be part of their platform. And then that entitles you to submit grant proposals. All of the major digitization projects that we have undertaken here at the library have been in partnership with the Digital Commonwealth. And as I mentioned, our photos are available here as well as on our website. Whoops, I just want to show you what our photos look like there. Oops. So I just did a simple search for Heart in Plymouth. And this has brought up actually photos, a number of which I utilized in making the slides for the presentation you just watched. And you can also find photos according to the collection that they were donated to the Digital Commonwealth from. So Plymouth is in here as well. As I said, we worked with them, and in addition to having the photos available to search here, they're also on the Plymouth website, and I will just take you briefly to that link. So as I said, there's a lot more detail and context about all of the photos that we've been looking at. In this website, we actually have a section that's devoted just to the parade because we have such a substantial collection of parade photographs. So here's more information about that day. And if you want, you can go in and actually look at all of the divisions. And as I said, thanks to the fact that these were published at the time, we were able to identify almost all of them with certainty. So in addition to more detailed information about the parade, you can also just view all of the photos in general. There's a little slideshow at the top. Most of these photos that we chose to put into the slideshow are more general photos. These were all taken by George P. McLaughlin. They're not simply of the day itself, but of some of the dedications and local monuments that were created in 1920 and 1921. So anyway, it was a very gratifying experience to be involved with the project and to see these photos go from not really being available for anyone to see or us having any way to share them to now being able to talk about them like this. So I don't know if there are any questions, but that really I hope sums up the day for you. Yes, I have a question. So the question is, are these copyrighted? These were actually slightly tricky. We have a copyright statement on the website, which is purposely vague. And the reason is because even though the photos are old enough to be in the public domain, meaning that they were out of copyright, because they were published, there are different rules. So at the time we were working on digitizing them, they were actually still copyrighted. because the publications were 1923, and it was just outside of being in the public domain. However, that is now expired. So, so these are really now public domain. And we do, so we have a statement, which we haven't updated because, as I said, it was a bit ambiguous. The situation was not clear cut when we published the website. But we have them out there. We hope people take them and use them. We do like it if people acknowledge that they're using our pictures, but nobody's going to get in trouble. So. So the digital, so the question is about the copyright status of items in the Digital Commonwealth collection. That's a massive collection. There are hundreds of thousands of things, and not all of those have copyright restrictions. You need to look and see. Many of them, I mean, almost everyone who's trying to digitize things in that manner, their goal really is to try and share these things. But occasionally there are restrictions. There are also, you can license things with something called a Creative Commons license, which we have not done. We chose not to do that for ours. Although, as I said, at the time we were working on this in earnest, the status was ambiguous. So because of the books, because they had been published in books. So I used several photos in the slideshow that I had taken from the Digital Commonwealth. They're all in the public domain, but I gave credit. They come from a really wonderful collection called the Leslie Jones Collection, owned by the Boston Public Library. So so it's nice, and it's not just, to me, it's not just copyright issues. It's I just feel like it's important to acknowledge where these things come from, where people have found them. You know, they didn't all just get out there floating around on the internet. You know, people researched and worked, and put effort into trying to preserve these in an electronic fashion. So, are there any comments?
I just wanted to comment.
I wanted to just comment quickly. I love these photos. I love that they're available. They have helped me in my research that I've been doing for programming at the library. And what I appreciate is that they're just such high quality. And you can really zoom in on some of these things. So if you're researching something unrelated, like some of the buildings in the background, you can still use these photos and zoom in. And but it's also nice because you can see some of the personal touches. You can zoom in on faces. You can zoom in on some of the fashions of the day, the cars. So you really do get a sense of this time period in Plymouth, which is, I mean, it was just an utterly spectacular day. And it's really nice to immerse yourself in it. And just having such nice quality digitization allows for that. It's fantastic. So thank you, Liz, for all the work that you did on making sure that this happened and is now available to everybody. All right, so I think that wraps it up. It doesn't look like we have any other questions. So I just wanted to thank you again, Liz. Thank you for putting the presentation together and reminding us what a fantastic day this was. And primarily for being the force behind getting these photos digitized in the first place. So thank you very much. And we will have this recording up on YouTube in a couple of days. So it should be available for you to watch again if you want to. All right, thanks very much, everybody.